What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. I'm Joe. That is Dylan. And we're talking Dylan. And it's another special episode. Today, we're dealing double Dylan with his early 90s Back to Basics acoustic sets. Good as I've Been to You and World Gone Wrong. We're going to cover both. Get them the hell out of the way so we can move on to the good stuff. No, I'm not going to disclose my opinions yet. These are interesting albums. I'd never heard these before. I'm not sure I knew of their existence before we started this series and I was looking through his discography and I saw these two and I tried to recall if I'd ever heard anyone mention them ever. And the answer was no. And I think you brought them up maybe once or twice on this whole podcast, maybe just in the last episode to say we're going to do them back to back together in the next episode. So, I mean, are these some things that are just completely forgotten about? Are they just so inconsequential to Dylan fans that they're never mentioned? Like you're gonna have to clue me in on the scoop of these two albums here.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things at play here. In general, yeah, I when you look at you know the albums in his discography that you could generally argue are forgotten about, yeah, I think these would be up there. And I think some of that is due to the way that people generally treat and think about cover albums, especially by artists who are generally original songwriters. I have a lot of thoughts about what the term cover album even means, but we can revisit those another time, maybe when we're not trying to cover two albums in one episode. But I think that's some of it, and I think that the other big aspect of it is simply the time in which they were released. You know, even though we had Oh Mercy and the success of the first Wilburys record, this is still ultimately, I think, in somewhat of a prolonged period of Dylan not necessarily being forgotten about, but certainly not at the height of his critical or commercial powers. So you get two albums, his first all acoustic albums in almost 30 years. He didn't write any of the songs on them. They came after an album that was not well received, has continued to not be well received. And they also come just a few years before this big critically acclaimed comeback for Time Out of Mind in 97. So these don't get a lot of discussion, but I do think that they're generally, from what I can tell at least, somewhat well thought of generally among Dylan fans. I don't think anyone has them at the top of their rankings or even near the middle of their rankings necessarily, but I feel like I've talked to quite a few Dylan fans who generally see the merit in them. And I'm interested to see what you think of them, but there's a couple things in between Under the Red Sky, which we've covered in the last episode, and definitely go and check that one out. That's a fun one. Um, in between then and now, there's a few things. I can't remember if we talked about it or not in the last episode, but we have Traveling Wilburys Volume 3, their second album, second and final album, without Roy Orbison, who passed shortly after the first album came out. And like I said, I can't remember if we talked about it or not, but I actually like this record. And Bob's got quite a few lead vocals on it, including If You Belong to Me, which is one of my favorites. It doesn't have the same unique energy or sense of fun as the first record, and definitely not as sort of, I guess, immediately memorable. But I think it's a pretty good album overall and worth revisiting if you're a Beatles or Dylan super fan. I don't know if you've ever listened to it whatsoever.
I have heard it. I didn't listen to it again for this show or anything like that, but
Yeah.
I've heard it in the past 5 years, we'll say. And I remember sort of being nonplussed by it. It was just sort of like, this is fine, but the magic isn't really there. And when did it come out? 1990 or 91?
I think November of 1990.
Okay, yeah. So 1990, another victim claimed by 1990.
Yeah.
I listened to it for our album of the year series in 1990 as I was frantically searching for, great albums
Yeah.
from that year.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't have the same magic. I don't think anyone would argue that it does. I think for me, it's one of those albums that every time I've gone back to it over the years, it's just grown on me more and more. But it's by no means any super important uh, document. But we do have a few super important documents, leading up to these albums that we're about to talk about. Uh, two events that I think really impact Bob's overall mindset and eventual artistic direction for this decade. In March 1991, we finally get the Bootleg series, volumes 1 through 3, three CD set, unreleased stuff from 61 to 91. We've been talking about it, on and off since like episode 2 of this series, just the wealth of incredible outtakes, alternate takes, live cuts, etc. We already had the Biograph box set back in '85 that kind of reignited some interest in his classic material, but this is really the first release that sheds a major light on the wealth of high quality and interesting material that this guy didn't release, which adds a whole new layer of fascination to, an artist who's already so enigmatic. Again, maybe one day I'll peer pressure you into doing a full bootleg series dive with me, but we've already listened to so many, that without that we don't have Blind Willie McTell. We don't have all the other great infidels and saved outtakes. We don't have some of the other initial New York sessions for Blood on the Tracks that kind of show the other sides of Idiot Wind and some other stuff like that. And then next year, October 16th, 1992, a couple months after Good As I've Been to You has already been recorded, we have the 30th anniversary Bob Dylan celebration concert at Madison Square Garden. This totally star-studded cast. You got Neil Young, Tom Petty, George Harrison, Stevie Wonder, Johnny Cash, Tracy Chapman, Chrissie Hynde, so many others, contemporaries and disciples of his, a few modern acts of the day. And some really great performances, including a cool version. I should have sent it to you. This really cool version of My Back Pages. That's basically the Byrds arrangement, but it incorporates all the verses. And, McGuinn is there. He takes the first verse. Petty takes a verse. Harrison, Neil, Clapton, eventually, Bob himself. And Bob is there performing a few songs of his own, and it's called the 30th anniversary celebration because it's 30 years since the release of his first album in 1962. And Bob's performances are not the best, and it's kind of in line with his performances in general throughout the early 90s. You listen to any bootleg or most any bootleg, and you can tell this guy is still kind of lost. Oh mercy, be damned. You know, still probably drinking quite a bit, not seeming very confident, which you definitely, I think, hear in the vocals of Under the Red Sky. He sounds like someone who maybe needed to, I don't know, get back to his roots. So. So that's kind of where these albums come in. So I don't know if you have anything else to add before we get into them.
Well, a couple things. I read that, on the Never Ending Tour that Dylan was on from, I don't know when it started, 1988 maybe,
88.
uh,
Yep.
88. He started incorporating some of these, old-fashioned traditional songs into his repertoire. So that idea started, infiltrating his music, I guess, much earlier than these albums, 4 years after he started doing those kind of things. And his first attempt was a big false start, apparently, because he recorded I don't know if it's the same set list or a different set list with David Bromberg, full backing band, traditional and bluegrass music. And he was like, "All right, we're done. Bromberg, you mix it." And he left. He came back. He's like, "Nah, you don't get it." And he scrapped the whole thing. And Bromberg was like, I could remix it," and he could tell that Dylan had already like moved on. It's like that's so sad. Um, that's devastating.
Classic tale.
That's classic
A
Dylan
tale as old as
there.
time. If I
Um,
was Bromberg, I would have been like, dude, did you hear what the Was brothers just did like 2 years ago? And what I did wasn't good enough.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Did a couple of those songs appear, I think, later on a bootleg series or something like that?
Yep, Volume 8, Telltale Signs, which is the same place you can hear the incredible version of Born in Time that I mentioned was recorded for Oh Mercy and then later ruined for Under the Red Sky. Yeah, Duncan and Brady, and there might be one more. Funnily enough, when I saw Dylan for the first time, my very first concert in 2000, he opened up with Duncan and Brady, which I think everyone in the place was like, don't know what the fuck this is, but sure, sounds good. And it sounds good. Yeah, I don't know what about it was so offensive that would have made Bob say we got to scrap this and start from scratch, but he did, and I don't think it was the exact same song list, but yeah, he retreated to his garage, the little setup that he had there, and for the first time in I guess 28 years since 1964, another side said, "All right, I'm going all acoustic for this baby."
Yeah, and it's just him, Micaiah Ryan, credited with engineering, mixing. His friend Debbie Gold was listed the producer. I guess he just really trusted her and consulted her with all the takes. And I guess we can get into it.
Let's do it.
I mean, do you want to go first, or should I go first? Does it really matter for something like this?
I would like to know what you think, and yeah, I don't know how you laid out your notes. If you want to kind of talk about, so we're talking about Good as I've Been to You right now. Then the following year, 1993, we have World Gone Wrong, which same thing, recorded in his garage, all acoustic, folk and blues songs, some traditional, some credited to other songwriters, and often viewed as brother and sister albums for obvious reasons. I hear a couple differences between them. I can get into those a bit, but it's up to you if you want to just talk about Good as I've Been to You. If you want to talk about them as a whole, by all
Well,
means.
it's hard not to talk about both of them, but I'll start with Good as I've Been to You and just sort of go over a couple things. It's a folk album with one white guy, American, singing and just playing acoustic guitar. And the solo acoustic folk and blues by a white American male is probably my least favorite setup for like an album of like anything. Like I really can't think of many that I like and come back to. Like I need some like thick Irish accent or female vocal or an African American blues man or something. But I think there are some good things about this album. I'll just get that out of the way. I think it sounds great. I think I mean sound wise, it's 1,000 times better than Under a Red Sky. I think I don't want to like compare it with Oh Mercy because it's a completely different type of music, but it's crystal clear sounding. Micaiah Ryan and Debbie Gold do a great job of, I don't know, leading Dylan down the right path for the takes and everything like that. I think the guitar sounds great. I really noticed maybe for the first time, I don't know, like ever, that Dylan was playing pretty good. It's not like super advanced folk music, but I think his guitar playing over the years has definitely improved. Some some cool stuff. His vocals, he's getting older, the vocal deteriorating, but I think they sound really clear and well recorded. I like some of the song selection. I don't think it's the greatest song selection of all time. I like the folkier stuff, I think more than the bluesier stuff, more than the traditional stuff. 6.5 minutes of Froggy Went a Courtin'. It's probably a couple minutes too long. I thought he got over the whole kid song stuff on the Red Sky, but apparently not. I think Little Maggie might be the highlight for me. I really like the guitar playing on it. And there's a nice mix of like British folk songs and blues songs and a Stephen Foster song in there and some traditional songs that are arranged by him. And I don't know if anything really stands out other than that. Like it's a very nice sounding, pleasant album. It might be a little long, as all Bob Dylan albums are. But I like the Arthur McBride and Tomorrow Night and the You're Gonna Quit Me by Blind Blake. And I think all in all, it's a good return to, what Dylan does really well, which is well, I mean, he does a lot of things really well, but I think we've talked about how good he is at interpreting other people's material, maybe an underrated aspect of his, musicianship and
100%. Yeah.
because everyone talks about his original stuff, which obviously is a little higher on most people's totems poles,
Totem poles.
totem poles. But yeah,
Totems poles.
his his arranging skills are great, and I think this type of music suits his kind of more haggard voice. So I don't have any complaints. It's not incredibly exciting to me, and I'm probably at 3 stars for it, a high 3 stars. It's just not a type of album that I'm really ever going to return to. And especially within someone's catalog like Bob Dylan, there's just more interesting things to me. And despite the good production and everything, I'd still rather hear the full band, the Dylan, the self-portrait stuff over sparse, one guy with an acoustic guitar, occasional harmonica kind of thing. So that's where I am.
Yeah.
I thought it was better than I expected it to be, knowing what it was. I'll say that.
Yeah, I completely understand all that. I wrote down here in my notes that I wouldn't classify a guy in his early 50s recording a bunch of folk and blues standards as particularly Joe Core. Um, but I'm happy to hear that on multiple levels. Just because I think there's a lot of great material here that I'll get into a second, and I'm happy you're able to pick up on that. And also, I think that you and I, really more so you, have reason to be cautiously optimistic about moving forward. When you say, this sort of material suits the more haggard voice, because I guess you could argue that his voice gets more haggard the older he gets, but I genuinely think his voice gets stronger with some of the records coming up. At least, like, I think he sounds a little more robust, and where he goes musically, I think it's going to be a lot more to your liking than you think it is. I'm not going to say that you're going to fall in love with every single thing that he does moving forward, but think we have reason to be optimistic here. But yeah, I really like these albums for a few different reasons, and I'll try to stick to Good as I've Been to You for right now. Yeah, like I said, I don't know if I've ever met a Dylan fan who like truly dislikes them, but from what I can tell, I hold these albums in higher regard than most. Because I love traditional folk music from both sides of the Atlantic, American and British or Irish. I love the blues and I love Bob Dylan. So, there's a lot for me to enjoy across these albums, especially my very first note. And I'm so happy that you brought it up that I didn't have to lead you here, considering his guitar work. I think that these records feature some of his best recorded guitar playing. And on this record, yeah, Little Maggie, probably my second favorite song on the record. Fantastic guitar playing on that, and kind of the bluesy stuff in general. Frankie and Albert sitting on top of the world, he sounds really good on. And yeah, like you said, we've discussed it multiple times before. Bob is a lover, a student, a messenger of folk music, as evidenced by the debut album, which we both really like. The debut has this urgency, this kind of like wild spirit to it. And that's fantastic, but there's a maturity to these records that resonates with me just on a different level. Like to me, it feels like he kind of gets these compositions in a way that like he couldn't have 30 years prior. Like as much as I love hearing him do in my time of dying and fixing to die, it's like it's done in the spirit of this 20-year-old who's, so intoxicated by this music and he loves it and he wants to perform it. But these songs, he's kind of lived them a little bit now. And you can hear it, I think, in his voice. Like I hear shades of mournfulness and resignation and wisdom and yearning just permeating throughout these songs that he's cherished for decades. Songs like Tomorrow Night and my personal favorite, Hard Times, the Stephen Foster tune, I think are just really emotional. And like to me, they foreshadow his ability to handle some of the more delicate Sinatra melodies, 20 years in the future, which his voice sounds different on those records. And I cannot wait to get to those. But yeah, I just think there's a seasoned sort of quality to his singing that is a really big benefit to some of like the storytelling ballads like Jim Jones, Blackjack Davy, which also has some really killer guitar work. So I really dig it, and I also really dig World Gone Wrong, which if you want to get into now, we can pick it back up from there. As far as I know, there's not too many major events that happen in between the two albums. But for you, did you hear any difference in World Gone Wrong? Because I definitely do, but it's taken me, I think, years of hearing them over and over to sort of differentiate them.
Yes. Yes, I definitely heard some differences. I gotta say, I'm glad that you backed me up in the guitar thing. Just side note, because the big Dylan book that I've been religiously reading talks about how rote and unimpressive his guitar playing was. And I was like, what? Like, am I out of touch? No, it is the
No,
book that is wrong.
it's
Definitely some, his guitar playing has definitely improved and he shows it
no.
off.
Let us stew here in our echo chamber. We are correct. We have always been correct, you and I.
Moving on after that, makes me feel good. So World Gone Wrong, same setup, I guess, right? And yet, this one without Debbie Gold. Same,
Debbie
Makaya.
gets the axe.
Debbie
She
gets the
gone.
axe. Surprisingly, for how good it sounded, World Gone Wrong does not sound the same. It is much grungier and dirtier, and the production, I read it was recorded on a cassette tape recorder, and I'm guessing, Good as I've Been to You was not. Just a four-track, like Nebraska by Bruce Springsteen, apparently. This one, the mix is a little odd, especially on the first song. It sounds like almost two different, like completely, like the first Good as I've Been to You sounds like a very like cohesive, like, set everything up really well, like, mic it close, like get everything perfect. And this one sounds like, okay, record the vocals over there. Okay, now we're going to a different room. We're just wing it. Just record the guitar. It doesn't matter. We'll smash them together. And it took me a little while to warm up to this one. At first, I was like, I don't like this. Like, where's that crystal clear recording? Like, where's the professional sounding mix? But I do think this one is slightly superior in the end. It grew on me, and I think maybe it's the song choices. They're a little dirtier. Like I said, they're a little, you know, more mournful, more in the blues tradition, I think. His voice is, I think, a little worse sounding. It's like a little more nasally and weird. He sounds like a bum, like a drifter on this album more than Good As I've Been to You, where he kind of sounds like a clean cut folky. Like now he's like the dirty grease and dirt covered, I don't know what they're called, the stick and the little handkerchief with all your belongings in it, trudging down
Dude,
the
you are
like
asking the wrong person.
I
I
don't I don't know.
could not be less handy or helpful in any of
Well,
those ways. So.
nevertheless, again, guitar playing mostly excellent. I think there's some cool stuff on here. Really like Blood in My Eyes, probably my favorite track on the album. Real nice melody, really played well. Broke Down Engine, I think, has the best guitar playing. I was actually impressed by by it, and it sounds real good. Delia or however you say it.
Delia.
Delia, very purty. Just a purty song there. Didn't
Oh,
love Stack of Lee, probably my least favorite. That's sort of like that folky,
same.
like fake old-timey mumbly blues man voice, which yeah, it just sounds like he's trying a little too hard, too little too exaggerated. But overall, the first time I heard it, I don't know if I was listening close enough to get some of the nuance and some of the guitar playing and everything. Second time through, really started to appreciate the song choices, and I think it is a superior album, even if it's not produced as well. I guess that sort of, you know, comes with the territory and comes with some of these songs that suits them a little better. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good album. I'm gonna go 3.5 stars. I do wish, I wish Dylan would just not always do these themed albums. Like throw a couple more originals on here. Do something else. Throw a full band performance or something. I don't know. The whole like two straight albums of all acoustic, folky, bluesy covers seems like a little much. I think you probably could have done one. Maybe spruced it up with a full backing band, but whatever.
Well, just you
Um,
wait until we get three Sinatra albums in a row, and the third one is a triple album. So,
yeah, for as great as Bob Dylan was, as far as like being an album maker, he had some issues. I feel like almost everything he ever done could have been slightly better if he had put like a little more thought into some of it. But I think overall, two pretty good albums, better than I expected. Really think World Gone Wrong kind of just nails it as far as like solo acoustic white guy doing blues and traditional albums. I don't know if it's going to get any better than this for me.
I gotta say, in my wildest dreams, I don't know if I ever would have expected a 3.5 star review from you for either of these records for a solo acoustic traditional set of tunes from Bob Dylan in the midnight. I mean, the progress is just and it fantastic. Yeah, it's to me, there's definitely a difference. Like I think World Gone Wrong in general just kind of appears to have more of like a thematic thread going through it. I almost sort of viewed these two albums in a way like Freewheelin' and The Times They Are a Changin'. I feel like Good As I Been to You is a lot like Freewheelin', where he's just sort of like laying out all his cards. There's not any major theme going through anything, but both of them are, it's just sort of him like flexing all of his muscles and be like, yeah, I'm the best. What the fuck are you gonna do about it? Whereas World Gone Wrong and Times They Are Changes, like, all right, I've shown you everything I can do. Now I'm gonna make this kind of more focused statement. And he's maintaining that talent, honing it in. It's very singular. And and I think they're both great. I think that the latter approach, needs to be acknowledged and celebrated at an artistic level, but I don't think it takes away from everything that, the former achieves, which is kind of like setting the scene for what's to come. And, just World Gone Wrong is such a dark record. Like almost every song there's a lot of lost characters and death and all these things. And, historically, I think I've always leaned maybe slightly towards Good as I've Been to You because I really appreciated some of the like diversity in the styles and the themes. But recently, I think I've been giving the edge uh to World Gone Wrong just because I think it's fascinating. And but it features a lot of the same things I love about it. The guitar playing, you're completely right. Broke Down Engine sounds incredible. My favorite track on the record, Delia. You're right. Beautiful in terms of, its melody and his performance, but also a very heartbreaking story. Which again, it goes back to the way that he's able to deliver that and the way that he's able to deliver a song like Two Soldiers or Love Henry, um, especially probably my second favorite on the album, if not my first, Lone Pilgrim. The closer is just so it tugs at my heartstrings every time. And in general, I try to examine my musical opinions divorced from like, I don't know, popularly held beliefs in certain contextual circumstances. Because, context can inform the content of an album, and it's appropriate to consider, but I don't think that anyone should feel forced to enjoy something just because it's objectively important or interesting or anything like that. So, to that end, I think I'd still like these albums, even if I didn't know the general circumstances surrounding them, which is that Bob had seen four of his last five albums completely critically massacred and is now returning to his roots to recollect himself. But admittedly, I do think that this context does play a part in my appreciation for them and my enjoyment of them. Because, like, even going back to Good as I've Been to You, like, I sense a lot of self-awareness in a song like Sitting on Top of the World, which is already like a tongue-in-cheek set of lyrics. Like, for Bob Dylan in 1992 to be singing Sitting on Top of the World 2 years after Under the Red Sky, you know, that's funny, but it's very clever and smart, in this. It just goes to show again, even when he's not performing his own things or his own compositions, he is able to bring out these elements of a song that you can only do if you are an incredible performer. And I hear a lot of empathy for and relatability to the characters in these songs. He really sings them with a lot of conviction. And although I've never disbelieved him on any of the other like cover albums that he's done, I don't think I believe him on any of them more than I do on these. Uh, and I think a big part of that is the way in which they're delivered, just him alone, with that voice and that guitar. Yeah, and the songs are great. I love Canada.io. I also love Arthur McBride. Yeah, the World Gone Wrong, the title track, Blood of My Eyes is beautiful. Um, yeah, I really like both of these records a lot. And whenever we do our big ranking, they will probably be higher up than a lot of people would anticipate.
Do they get to 4 stars for you? Are they 3.5 star albums?
I guess we'll have to see, won't we?
Oh, spoiler. Or not spoiler. What's the word?
Yeah. Spoiler for
Not
sure.
spoiler.
Intrigue, we'll
Yeah.
say.
Well, that's just good showmanship. By you, Dylan.
Yeah, I do what I can. But, before we, risk spoiling anything or adding even more intrigue, we can only get to that final ranking if we get through these records, and the next one's another big one. So by this point, you know all about Time Out of Mind. You know that all the Dylan heads love it, and it's his big comeback, and blah blah blah. And everyone on the Discord is saying, "Oh, Joe's gonna love this one," which they always do when they're trying to project. Which, if you're out there watching or listening and thinking, "Hey, what do they mean by Discord?" All you have to do is check the description below for the link to the Taste Like Music Patreon, where for just a few dollars, potentially even just $1 a month, you can help the channel keep going. You can keep supporting them. You can come talk to Joe and Jason and me and so many other wonderful people and talk all things music and be castigated for all your terrible opinions and castigate us for hours. It's a great community. And yeah, I think everyone is looking forward to Time Out of Mind. Have you? I know you've mentioned you've heard Love and Theft before, but you haven't heard Time Out of Mind, to your knowledge.
No, completely, totally blank slate when it comes to this one. All I know is Lanois produced it, and I know it's the big another comeback, whatever. It's like, God, how many comebacks can you possibly have?
This has to be at least
Um,
number three, if not number four.
yeah. And I know it's very well, thought of. It's been on, I don't know if it was on the last Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list, but the previous one, it was on there. It's on a bunch of those, 1001 albums you must hear before you die kind of thing. So I do know the critics love it. I'm interested to hear what it sounds like. I remember Love and Theft a little bit, but
Totally
I
different.
have no idea if this is like the start of that sound, or is Love and Theft a continuation of this one, or is it something completely new? Is it a continuation of Because I've Been to You and World Gone Wrong, except with a full band? Like I have no idea where this album's coming from. It could be any direction. I don't know.
Well, that makes me happy to hear because my advice going into this album, I'll tell you to keep in mind, I don't want to tell you to forget everything you know about Bob Dylan because I think that you keeping in mind everything you've learned through these records has helped your appreciation and enjoyment of his music, your appreciation for and enjoyment of his music. So, I guess you can remember what got him here, but like sonically, even Oh Mercy, which Lanois did, throw it out the door, throw out everything in your head what you think a Bob Dylan record is going to sound like musically, vocally, lyrically, and I hope at least a few of those are good things. I hope all of them are good things. I don't know. I truly there's a part of me that's like Joe might go 5 stars here, and then there's like another part of me that's like Joe might go like 2.5 stars here. I really don't know, but I think at the very least there's going to be some moments that really make you say, "Holy shit!" I'm really fast. I can't wait for this one. I'm. I don't want to get expectations up. We've talked about the curse of expectations, but I would be very surprised if you didn't have some form of reaction to this. I don't anticipate us coming on and you saying, "Yeah, it was good. I liked it." Yeah.
Well, I mean, this album is probably the last like great surprise. Although I have not heard the Frank Sinatra cover albums, but
Nor
I
Christmas
don't
in the
think
Heart.
those have the same gravitas that this album does. Like this is maybe the last time there's something that could like really change my whole perspective on Bob Dylan. So there's a lot of pressure on this album to perform when I listen to it in the next week or so.
I don't want you to put that pressure on yourself. I want you to be open to anything and Uh, this isn't the last time that I could even say that, that forget everything you've ever heard, because I don't think that Love and Theft sounds like Time Out of Mind, and I don't think that Modern Times, which comes after Love and Theft, sounds like those two records. And I don't think the I don't think that the I don't think that the Sinatra records, I don't think that Rough and Rowdy Ways, and not to say that all of them are reinventing the wheel, like, they're all maybe coming, they all exist in the same world, obviously, but there's these small differences, both in the bands who play on them, the production techniques, lyrically, his approach to all these records. I don't really anticipate this feeling of stagnation setting in at any point. Regardless of, how critically acclaimed any of these records are. Maybe other than potentially the Sinatra records, but we'll get there. Um, I'm really excited for this one. I think we're gonna have
Well,
a
I
lot
am
of
now. I wasn't before, but now I'm kind of excited to hear what good old Bob has in store for me on this next one.
for you. Yeah.
1997, right?
97. He did it all for you. He did it all for
97.
97. Is that 12-year-old Joe?
That is 12-year-old
11-year-old?
Joe. In 97, I had started listening to 100.7 because they had a big block of 80s pop songs and one-hit wonders. And I would listen intently, trying to hear Police and Prince songs and all the great pop hits of the 80s. I was not into anything modern at the time. Absolutely nothing new. It wouldn't be till like 98, 99 where I actually started listening to like, you know, alternative rock and whatever was actually new on the radio. So
No one was trying to push the mollusk on you when you were 12.
no. A lot of Weird Al Yankovic though. Tons of Weird Al.
Well,
So
that's
well,
because
that
you
was
are
my
surrounded
jam.
by good. Well, that's because you're a smart man.
So of course. So all right, 97, that is the year that I've listened to the least amount of albums of any year from 1963 until this year. So
Wow.
always happy to add another 97 album to the list. And that is what we will be listening to next time, I guess. I mean, that's it. We got through the acoustic albums because I've been to you, World Gone Wrong, better than I expected. Even if my scores don't reflect, a super high, star rating or anything,
Yeah.
sort of my faith in Bob Dylan has been restored a little bit. It was waning. It was definitely waning a little bit after Under a Red Sky, all that 80s crap. But I can see that he's kind of back on the right track. Those albums in the rearview mirror, Modern Times. No, not Modern Times. Is it
Time out of
Modern Times?
mind. Time
Time
out of
Out of
mind.
Mind,
They
in
both
the
have they both have time in the name.
yeah. This is confusing, Bob. Confusing. Time Out of Mind for next week. Listen to it. Join us again. We'll be discussing it. And in the meantime, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, check the description for all the social media, links to the Patreon. You can join us, like Dylan already beautifully stated. Join the Patreon, join the Discord, talk to us, all that good stuff. And get listening. We got more Bob coming next time here on the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. See you then.